college admissions changed? College admissions has changed over the last 20, 30 years, depending on when you went to college. It's really important for people to understand the difference between fit versus name and rankings. I know, especially in our area, that many students are really focused on just looking at schools that are maybe in the top 20 or the top 50 of US World and News Reports rankings. It's really important that when you sit down with your student to discuss colleges, that you ask them what is important to them to have in a school. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you have to ask them what factors are important to them. How big of a school do they want to go to? Do they want to go to a school that's in a city, in a college town, a rural setting? Do they have concerns about the distance from home or how they're going to get there? Do they want to arrive on campus by car? Are they comfortable going by bus or plane or train? Do they have an idea of what they want to study? So is there a specific department that they're looking for? Or if they go undecided, which is fine, upwards of 70% of students who apply to undergraduate colleges and universities in the United States go in as undecided. The question to determine beforehand is, how does the university handle that? Will it be easier to get into departments? There are certain majors that it's easier if you apply directly in. Do you want to go to an all-girls school, a school that only has men, or a school that only has women? Are you concerned about religion or activities or requirements to live on campus? These are all questions, and there's plenty more to determine what are your preferences, which obviously then lead to factors. And then you're able to evaluate which colleges really are the right fit. As I say to my parents and students, name is something that you wear on a t-shirt. A fit is something that will get you a positive collegiate experience. What is student demonstrated interest? With so many students applying from the United States and abroad, colleges sometimes track demonstrated interest, which means your student may attend a session at their high school. You may do a college visit. If colleges are allowing for in-person visits, which they are starting to do. If not, they have really enhanced their online platforms for participation and activities. So some schools do track demonstrated interest and they do take it into account. Some do not. But regardless if they do, it's important that your student really research the university first and foremost, and then try to make connections so that they can figure out if this school really is a good fit for them. Student engagement. It's really important for students not only to do well academically, but for them to do things outside of the classroom. Not only will it help to fill out a college admissions application, but it may also help them redefine or define what they will choose to study and potentially a career opportunity. It can also teach them wonderful skills like developing interests, expanding social circles, community service. Standardized testing has changed dramatically over the last 14 months due to the COVID-19 pandemic, with upwards of 97% of colleges and universities this past admission cycle, which is coming to an end, went test optional because students just did not have access to taking the SAT or ACT. The other thing that has occurred is that the College Board, which manages the SAT subject test, and AP exams, has decided to discontinue the SAT subject tests. So colleges are removing them as a requirement, which really is tending to have more focus on AP exam scores as well as IB exam scores. As I mentioned before, test optional colleges. Test optional colleges were always around. There's a website called Fair Test where they're listed. But with so many last year choosing to go test optional, some of them was for a 1-year trial. Some of them have expanded to a 3-year trial, with many more saying they're just permanently going to be test optional. But test optional means different things to different colleges. Some means that you don't have to submit a score. Sometimes test optional means that they might have a requirement to submit an AP score, an IB score. So you really have to look at their websites to understand what they're asking for the student. And then the last one is cost of college, which I think is the most important. College has risen and outstripped or outpaced inflation for over 40 years. Cost of college is really expensive. And even in Maryland, as an in-state student, without any merit aid, will cost an in-state student for a four-year degree around $100,000 if they don't receive any financial aid or merit aid. And I think it's important for students and parents to talk about cost at the beginning of the process, hopefully in middle school, if not earlier, so that your student understands their contribution, your contribution, and really to ensure that they don't come out of college so heavily in debt that it cripples them as young adults. What should your student focus on while in high school? It's really important that your student creates an individual high school course plan. What I do with my clients is starting in 8th grade or whenever they contract with me, we write out a 4-year plan. So it has all your courses for 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. And then every year in the spring before your student will register for classes, you revisit that plan. That plan will enable you to make sure that your student meets all of the required high school graduation requirements by the state and by Montgomery County, as well as it will help your students sort of refine and define their academic interests. So as they go through high school and through their freshman, sophomore, and by junior and senior year, they really should have room in their schedules where they can really input classes that they're interested in. And that also may help them to define or redefine a potential college major. It's important that while in high school, your student develops and utilizes strong organizational, interpersonal, and study skills. These are all things that students need to practice while they're home with you and while they're in high school, so that when they get to college, they will be able to manage their studies successfully. It's like anything. You don't just get up one day and ride a bike. You have to practice and practice until you can actually ride the bike. So it's important for them to be in charge when obviously it's appropriate based on their age for developing their organizational skills, deciding when they're going to study, talking about getting them ready to work in their activities. I use the example of a student who is on a soccer or a baseball or basketball or field hockey team, a sports team, and to allow them to make sure that they're ready to go at the time that you need to leave to drive them to practice. So just little simple tasks that will help them start to enhance and grow these skills. Obviously, interpersonal skills are really important. It's important for students to become comfortable talking to their teachers for a few reasons. As you grow up, you go to college, you're going to have professors. And if you've never talked to an adult in an educational setting, it might be more difficult for you. Also, by junior year, your student will have to ask 2 teachers to write teachers of letter of recommendation. So the hope is that they will have teachers that actually know them because they've gone out of their way to communicate with them or build a relationship with them. Teachers are also a wonderful resource for students of what's available within the school and within the county. And obviously study skills. Study skills are something that we all know that you perfect over time so that your student starts to understand how they study, how they best study, where they study, so that then they can replicate those skills when they get to college. In addition to making sure that they're focused on their academics, they need to cultivate summer plans that complement and enhance the student's interest. I understand over COVID, these plans have really been turned upside down, but students can still do things. Either, if it's virtual, community service, starting clubs, picking up a new interest, learning yoga. I have a client of mine who became a yoga instructor because she wants to be a nurse. And so she felt that it would really complement the anatomy classes and understanding how your body moves to get the full benefit out of yoga. There are lots of really exciting things that students are able to do even during COVID. And even if it's just that they picked up a new hobby or a passion, just to have something that they're doing. Because obviously doing well in school, and if test scores are required, doing well as possible, and those are important, but really showing your student as the full person they are is equally as important. Because all colleges want to know that their students are not only going to be capable when they arrive on campus from an academic standpoint, but they want them to engage in the campus, because an engaged student is one that is happy on campus. And every college and university in the United States is required to report their freshman retention rates. And that where you can actually find it if you look online. So obviously all schools, but it's not true, would like to have 90+ retention rates, which says that most of their freshmen are happy. And so they want to know that that person is going to be able to utilize the activities that are outside the classroom. As I said before, not only with teachers developing positive relationships, because I believe that they're a plethora of information, but it also will help that they will be able to write a very genuine letter of recommendation. High school guidance counselors are even more important. After the academics, so your grades, the rigor of your curriculum, your test scores, if they're asked, the high school guidance counselor recommendation is usually in the top 5 or 6 when undergraduate admissions officers rank things that are important to them. And it's super important that your student knows their guidance counselor well. First and foremost, it's not unusual in Montgomery County Public Schools that your student would be at a high school where there might be 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 students in his or her grade. And if you think about it, when that guidance counselor sits down to start writing recommendations, who are they going to begin with? Well, probably the students that they know better, probably the students that they've had some relationship with. And certainly, if they have 500 recommendations to write or 250 recommendations to write, you would rather that you be at the beginning than the end. And the more genuine the recommendation, the more weight it will hold. It's also important to identify and engage in extracurricular activities within the school or the community. It doesn't only have to be within the high school. As I said, it's important to colleges that students are engaged, because the thought is if you engage in high school, you'll engage in the college. And ultimately for colleges, they want you to be a happy undergraduate, graduate, and become a contributing alumni. It's important to determine, register, and prepare for all standardized testing. Obviously, the last 14 months, everything is turned upside down. We are hoping that it will become easier to take standardized testing. I know that the current AP cycle, that it's not been without problems, and it's not underway at this point either. So that is really important to be on top of that, to make a plan. Usually people start to take an SAT or ACT based on where they are in math. So a student who is advanced in math usually can take that first SAT, ACT at the very beginning of the junior year. If not, you always want to make sure that you have your first test some point, maybe in the mid to later part of your junior year, and you plan that test schedule. You might take it once and be happy and be done, but you also want to make sure you have time to take it a second time and maybe a third time, as well as be able to continue to keep up with your schoolwork, your extracurricular activities, and then if you are taking AP or IB classes, prepare for those exams in the spring. As I said before, it is always important to re-examine the student's high school course plan and making appropriate adjustments in the spring before your student registers for classes. What is most important to college admissions officers when evaluating college applications? This is information that was just released from NACAC, which is the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. This is the most important data. As you can see, grades and the strength of the curriculum are the top 3, followed by admission test scores. The reason that this is highlighted in yellow is that even though in this current cycle, where 97% of colleges and universities went test optional, as of last year, so now this is about 18 months ago, so prior to the pandemic, colleges still thought that those admissions tests were pretty important. Things have changed during the pandemic, as I said, but colleges still did receive test scores from students who had already tested prior to it if they went to public school. And those who went to private schools actually held testing days. So if you were not in public school, it was easier to get test dates. Below that, as you see, it says the counselor recommendation, followed by the essay and the writing sample. Writing is very important to colleges. You will write in college, even if you are a STEM major, you may have a general education requirement where you will write. Followed by teacher recommendations, followed by extracurricular activities, student demonstrated interest, Class rank, as you know, we do not rank students in Montgomery County Public Schools. Work experience, APIB scores. There has been discussions within my professional community that the importance of APIB scores may be increasing as more schools go test optional with respect to the ACT and SAT. And then the interview, the portfolio, state graduation exams, which we have graduation requirements, but not exams here in Maryland. And then the subject test score, as I said, which will be discontinued. So as it shows you, this is the viewpoint from those who are evaluating your student's application. So there's a lot of components here that that student has control over. They have control over the courses they take, how well they do in those courses from their perspective, just to do their best, what they can control. And then to make sure that they challenge themselves within the curriculum that is offered at their school. When your student applies to college, the school will send a complete transcript along with what is called a school profile. There is no standardized profile for Montgomery County Public Schools, so every high school has their own version. It will generally include written information about the school, general information. It will list the administration. It will list the AP or IB or both courses that are offered at the school. It may list how many AP exams or IB exams were taken by the particular exam and the different courses that are offered. As I said, we do not rank in Montgomery County, but there are, like the top 20, they will always show, we give a 1-point bump, as you know, for an AP and IB or an honors course or an advanced course. So they will show that distinction. So those that just put it in groups, you always want to be at the top. It may be the top 20%, the top 50%. So that's like really important. It's another way for your student to differentiate themselves. It's really, the school profile basically gives context to your individual transcript. So it tells the college admissions officer about the school, how rigorous it is, what they offer. Some schools put activities on there, awards, the different things that will differentiate the school. So how has COVID impacted the college admissions process? As I said before, the biggest impact was test optional. Colleges have not all made decisions for this coming cycle for the class of 2022. It looks like many of them will remain test optional. Some of them are doing 3-year evaluations, but we should be hearing that in the next couple of months. Test optional in the COVID pandemic made college review, holistic reviews, very possible. And there were increases across the board for students of color, low-income students. Once we removed the standardized test, with many believe favors higher income students because of the access to test prep, and they were really reading the application holistically, meaning they were reading the essays, they were reading your main essay, the complementary essays, looking at the activities, reading the letters of recommendation so that they could understand the student. There was also a significant increase in applications for many schools, especially the top 50, top 60, top 100 schools, because students without that barrier of the test score applied, more students applied. They did not admit anymore. So it made all the graduation rates for these top schools go down because they had more applications, the same amount of spots. So not necessarily was it was harder to get into, but they were not necessarily going to admit all those extra students, because even though the score was now not a barrier, they might not have had, maybe the rigor or the GPA or other things. As I said, there was an increase in diversity, which is an amazing positive. And it is my hope that that will go forward, because you're looking at candidates and you're reading what they have to say and what they are about, as opposed to just a specific score. The special admins is also, as I call that, special admins, we're talking about recruited athletes. We are talking about institutional objectives, which it could be to bring in more students of diverse backgrounds, either geographically, racially, economically. It can also refer to those who might get preferential treatment if they are an alumni. So those are still in play. International students, as many of you suspect, there was a significant drop in international students because of the COVID-19 pandemic, where countries were not only either not letting them travel, or the United States was not letting them in, or a combination thereof. So there was a lot of movement last summer off waiting lists because of COVID, where students decided to stay closer to home, or maybe students decided that they weren't going to go to that expensive out-of-state school and they were going to stay and go to their in-state school because potentially mom or dad or both had a change in employment status. And then the number of transfers. It is yet to be determined how that will be a factor. There were more students who did decided to go to start a community college for various reasons, which ultimately we hope that they will transfer to four-year institutions, but we will have to see how that will play out moving forward. As we move forward with the COVID-19 pandemic, there are schools that are making students to be vaccinated against COVID-19 and have proof of vaccination a requirement to come back on campus. This should not surprise anyone. Colleges and universities already require medical vaccinations in a wide range of vaccines, and you need to have proof of it. Some of it is required because you're going to live in a dorm, and some of it is just the basic vaccinations that many of us have our students be vaccinated, like measles, mumps, and rubella, having a tetanus shot. So you will need to look carefully when your student becomes a senior as to what vaccinations will be required. So here's information about Achieva. If you would like to reach me, my name is Melissa Cooper-Schmidt. You can email me, you can visit my website, or you can tweet me.